Hi everyone, Eugene here at Panasonic Europe, and in this quick video tutorial I want to show you how you can customize your LUMIX L10 and specifically customize what the exposure compensation dial does. Okay, so first of all, what do we mean by exposure compensation or exposure compensation dial? So let's jump into the second camera. So I can show you here on the top, you're going to see this little button with the plus and minus on it. And what that button does is when you are setting your camera to take a photo, or you want to compensate the exposure by a small increment without touching your exposure settings. So what I mean by exposure settings, you have your aperture, you have your ISO, you have your shutter speed, dialed exactly like you want the effect to have in that photo. What if you just want it slightly brighter, but you don't want a whole stop to go higher, right? You can do smaller increments, and that's where the exposure compensation comes in. So what we can do, I want to show you what it does by default when you press that button, and then what happens and what we can control and customize on the camera. So let's jump into the menu. The first thing to do is, again, actually, before we go into the menu, let me just show you what happens when I press this button, right? So you can see here now, I can make the image brighter or darker, right? I can compensate. Let's say I want to keep that a little bit brighter. At the same time, I'm keeping the same exact aperture. All the time now, the camera will compensate and overexpose it a little bit. Now, besides that, if I go into the menu, go down to settings, then go to operation on the right, then again on the right until you see exposure compensation display setting. If you select this, you'll have two options. You can now enable the cursor buttons. This is the cursor, right? That's the rear dial, that's the cursor, just so it's a little bit easier to understand ourselves. So if you then press OK on that, you can enable the exposure bracketing setting by the up or down keys. So we're gonna turn that on. And just really briefly before we go into a demo, I just want to explain what bracketing is. Essentially, the camera will allow you to take a photo at different exposures whilst pressing the shutter only once. So you press the shutter once, the camera will take a succession of photos. Some will be underexposed by a few half stops or a full stop. We'll get into the increments in a second as well. And then a couple will also be overexposed, and a couple may be exactly on the standard exposure that you set up. And what you can do with this, you can actually combine the images, or you can pick whichever you want, if you want one that's slightly underexposed. But the main key is what photographers typically do. They can combine all these shots into a single high dynamic range image. So you get all the detail in the shadows by compensating with the overexposed section, whilst maintaining all the details in the highlights by getting all the details in the shadows as well. So let's actually do a demonstration on this. So the cursor button up and down has been activated. The rear dial, right now, it controls the exposure, so we'll keep it like that. So let's get out of the menu and then press the exposure compensation, and you can see hopefully in the top left we have the possibility to turn on bracketing. And once that happened, hopefully you didn't miss this, if you know, you can go a few seconds in the video, we got these different brackets here, 7 of them, 7 to 1. That means there's going to be 7 exposures in a single shot. And then you can actually customize this. You can go 7 to 3, smaller brackets, and then you go 5 to 1, and so on and so forth. So let's say I want to do 3. Okay, I want to have an image that's, and actually right now because we already have the exposure compensation turned on, let me just take this back to 0. And then go back to the 3. There we go. So hopefully you can now see a little bit easier. There are 3 dots over there. One it's at 0, 1 minus 1, so 1 stop less of exposure, and 1 stop plus exposure. We're going to select that with OK. And now we can take an image. Hold the shutter button. And hopefully you heard there were actually three separate shots. And if we go and play them back, we'll be able to see, right, as I cycle through these, you can see this is the standard one, then there's a darker one, and then there's a brighter one. And that's basically how you can use this. Now, besides that, again, if we go back into the menu, exposure compensation setting, we can go to the rear dial. You can customize with the dial controls even more. So you can leave it to just control exposure compensation like it currently does, or you can actually use this setting with the flash exposure compensation in case you are using a flash, or you can turn off the rear dial, completely. So let's take that out of the menu, and actually let's just go back and turn this off as we're not going to need it. But that's the idea. That's how you can customize what that particular exposure compensation dial setting does. So thanks so much for watching. Hopefully this helps, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.